It's strange how one word, one rumor, one sentence whispered into the wrong ear can rip apart everything you thought was safe and solid in your life. I can still remember the exact moment I found out what my wife was saying about me. It was a chilly Tuesday morning in late October of 2019, the kind of morning where the air smells faintly of damp leaves and gasoline from commuters rushing to work. I had just poured myself a cup of coffee, black, and was scrolling through my phone when I saw a message from a mutual friend, someone I hadn't spoken to in months. The message was short, clipped, almost hesitant. "Hey man, I heard some stuff about you. Is everything okay at home?" At first I thought it was nothing. Maybe gossip, maybe someone misunderstanding a fight we'd had. But when I called him back, his tone was low and serious, and what he said next cracked open my entire world. He told me that Sarah, my wife of 7 years, had been telling people I was abusive. Not just controlling, not just angry, but physically abusive. I swear in that moment the coffee tasted like ash in my mouth. My hands shook so bad I had to set the mug down before I dropped it. Abusive. The word didn't even fit in my head when I tried to attach it to myself. I've always been careful, almost too careful, about never raising my voice, never letting my temper cross a line. My own father had been the kind of man who thought yelling was communication, who slammed doors hard enough to rattle picture frames. I swore I would never be him. And now here I was, hearing that my wife had painted me with the very brush I spent my whole life running from. I couldn't process it at first. I remember staring at the steam rising from my coffee and thinking, this isn't real. She wouldn't do this. She knows me better than anyone. But at the same time, something sharp cut through that disbelief because deep down, if I was honest, I had felt cracks forming long before that morning. To make sense of it, I have to take you back. Back to the years before everything fell apart. Sarah and I met in 2011 at a mutual friend's Halloween party in Boston. I was dressed as some half-hearted version of Clark Kent, tie loosened, glasses on, suit jacket a size too big. She came as Catwoman, though her costume was more cute than sultry. Black leggings, plastic ears, and a sharp laugh that carried across the room. She was magnetic. When she talked, people leaned in, and when she smiled at me, I felt like the only guy in the room. We moved fast. By spring of 2012, we were living together in a small apartment in Cambridge, one of those old brick buildings with uneven hardwood floors and radiators that hissed all night. We got married in 2013 at a church just outside the city, surrounded by friends, family, and that kind of naive optimism that makes you think love alone can carry you through anything. I can still see her walking down the aisle in that lace dress, her father gripping her arm, the sound of Ed Sheeran's "Kiss Me" playing in the background because it was our song. That moment is burned into my memory, pure and golden. The first few years were good. We were broke but happy, eating takeout Thai food on the couch, arguing about who left the lights on, binge-watching Breaking Bad, when it was still a cultural obsession. We built routines, inside jokes, a shared history. But looking back, I can see where things started to shift. It was around 2016, after we bought our house in the suburbs outside of Boston. It was the American dream on paper. A modest 2-story with beige siding, a patchy lawn I swore I'd take better care of, and a spare room we planned to turn into a nursery one day. But Sarah changed in that house. Or maybe she had been changing for a while, and I was too wrapped up in my work to notice. I was climbing the ladder at my job, working in IT for a mid-sized healthcare company. Long hours, sometimes weekends, because I thought providing for us was the most important thing I could do. Sarah, meanwhile, had started spending more time at her new job at a marketing firm downtown. She loved the social side of it, the happy hours, the conferences, the energy. She'd come home buzzing, telling me about all these new colleagues, especially one guy named Mark. At first I didn't think much of it. I trusted her. I wanted to. But then there were small things. Missed dinners. Late nights at the office. Smudged lipstick when she came home that didn't look like it had been put on for work. I told myself I was being paranoid, that I was overthinking. I didn't want to be that jealous husband who accused his wife of cheating because she stayed out late with co-workers. Still, the tension built in ways I couldn't ignore. She got more critical of me, more distant. If I tried to hug her while she was on her phone, she'd shrug me off. If I asked her about her night, her answers were clipped, defensive. I started to feel like I was living with a stranger. And now, in hindsight, I realized those cracks were widening into canyons. I just didn't want to see it. The first real red flag I can't shake was Christmas 2018. We hosted her family that year, and while everyone else was laughing in the living room, I caught her in the kitchen whispering on her phone. When she saw me, she jumped, flushed red, and said it was just work. Who the hell talks to their boss on Christmas Eve? But I let it slide, telling myself not to ruin the holiday. That's the thing about betrayal. It never happens all at once. It comes in small, sharp pieces, little slivers of doubt that stick under your skin until they bleed you dry. By the time that October morning rolled around in 2019, part of me already knew something was wrong. But never in a million years did I expect that. To hear that my wife, the woman who once cried when I held her hand during the Boston Marathon bombings in 2013, the woman I built a home with, was telling people I was abusive. It felt like being stabbed and then told it was my fault for bleeding. I sat there in my kitchen, the morning light spilling across the counter, my phone buzzing with messages I couldn't bring myself to answer. My chest was tight, my thoughts a mess. Was this her way of justifying something else? Was she trying to push me out of the marriage before I found out what she was really doing? Or did she actually believe the stories she was telling about me? I didn't have answers then. All I had was that sickening swirl of confusion and dread, and the knowledge that my life, the life I thought I had under control, was about to unravel in ways I couldn't even imagine. I thought I could hold myself together after that morning, that if I just confronted Sarah calmly, we could clear the air. Maybe it was a misunderstanding. Maybe she said something in anger and it spiraled. That's what I told myself as I paced the kitchen, heart pounding like I'd just run a marathon. But the thing about lies is that they don't sit quietly. They grow, spread, find their way into ears you never expected. And within days, the whispers became a roar. The first real confrontation happened on Saturday, October 26, 2019. I'll never forget it, because the Red Sox had just finished one of their worst seasons in years, and sports radio was buzzing with angry callers when I turned on the car that morning. It felt fitting somehow. Boston in mourning, me in denial. That night we had plans to go to a dinner party at the home of Sarah's co-worker, Emily. Normally I would have begged off because I hated those things. Too much wine, too many people bragging about job titles and new cars. But I told myself it was a chance to see Sarah in her element, to remind myself that we were still a team. When we walked in, though, the energy was off. People smiled, but their eyes lingered on me a second too long. Whispers, sideways glances, the kind of atmosphere you feel in your bones even before anyone says a word. I brushed it off, tried to laugh, tried to join conversations, but I could feel it. The air was heavier around me, charged with suspicion. And then it happened. Mark, the same Mark I'd heard her mention 100 times, came up to me by the kitchen counter while Sarah was across the room. He leaned in, that smug little grin on his face, and muttered just loud enough for me to hear, "Don't take it out on her tonight, all right?" The words hit me like a punch. I froze, staring at him, my jaw clenched so tight I thought my teeth would crack. In that moment I knew. This wasn't gossip taken out of context. This wasn't a misunderstanding. She had been telling people I was abusive, and she'd been saying it enough that her co-workers, her friends, even this smug bastard Mark, felt comfortable throwing it in my face. I left the party without a word. Drove home in silence, hands gripping the wheel so hard my knuckles were white. Sarah came home hours later, reeking of wine and perfume that wasn't hers. She barely looked at me when she walked in, just tossed her heels by the door and muttered something about me embarrassing her by leaving. That night, while she slept, I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at her. My wife, the woman I had defended, supported, sacrificed for, and all I could think was why? Why would she tell people I was abusive when I never laid a hand on her? Why would she choose that lie of all lies, knowing how deeply it would cut me? The answer came faster than I expected. A week later, on November 2nd, I got the call that changed everything. It was from Lisa, a mutual friend of ours from church. She sounded awkward, hesitant, like she wasn't sure if she should be telling me. But she said she thought I deserved to know, that Sarah had been seeing someone, that people were talking, that the abuse story was her way of covering her tracks, of making sure no one blamed her if things came out. I remember sitting at my desk when I got that call, my computer screen glowing with emails I couldn't even see anymore. My stomach dropped, my skin went cold. My first instinct was denial. Sarah would never cheat. She might be distant, she might be critical, but she wasn't cruel. She wasn't that kind of person, except she was. That night I confronted her. Not with anger, not with yelling, just a quiet, exhausted plea for the truth. I told her I'd heard things, that I needed her to look me in the eye and tell me they weren't true. She laughed. Actually laughed. This cold, bitter laugh that didn't sound like her at all. Then she turned it back on me, said I was paranoid, said I was controlling, said my temper was scaring her. It was like gaslight stacked on gaslight. Every word she said twisted reality a little more, until I started questioning my own memory, my own sanity. Had I raised my voice too much? Had I been too harsh, too cold? I replayed every argument in my head, every slammed cabinet, every sigh of frustration, and wondered if maybe she was right. Maybe I was the villain in this story. But deep down, something in me refused to accept that. I knew myself. I knew the man I was. And I knew I wasn't what she was saying I was. The breaking point came on November 10th, 2019. That day is etched into my memory like a scar. Sarah had told me she was going to a work retreat up in Vermont for the weekend. She packed a small suitcase, kissed me on the cheek like nothing was wrong, and left. But something about the way she avoided eye contact, the way she rushed out the door, set my nerves on fire. That night I couldn't sleep. I sat in the living room staring at the glow of the TV without hearing a word. Around midnight I picked up my phone and did something I'd never done before. I opened her laptop. She'd left it on the desk, and part of me told myself it was wrong, invasive, a violation of trust. But then another part of me whispered, what trust? It didn't take long. Her messages with Mark were right there, saved in an email thread. Explicit, intimate. Not just flirty, not just suspicious, but undeniable. Plans to meet at hotels, whispered fantasies, complaints about me, painting me as some abusive monster to justify what they were doing. I scrolled through in disbelief, each line like another nail in the coffin of my marriage. And then the final blow, a selfie of them together in a hotel room. His arm around her waist, her head on his shoulder, both of them grinning like kids at prom. She looked happier in that photo than she had looked with me in years. I can't even describe the feeling that hit me. It wasn't just anger. It was grief. Like someone had died, except the person who died was the version of Sarah I thought I knew. When she came back from her retreat 2 days later, I was waiting. She walked in, suitcase in hand, smiling faintly like nothing had happened. And I just broke. I told her I knew. That I had seen everything. That I knew about the lies, the affair, the betrayal. Her face hardened instantly. No tears, no apologies, no denial. Just cold defiance. She said I was crazy. That I was stalking her, invading her privacy, proving exactly why she told people I was abusive. And then she did the unthinkable. She grabbed her phone, dialed her sister, and put it on speaker, telling her that I was losing it, that I was threatening her. In that moment, I realized it was over. Not just the marriage, but the life I thought I had. Sarah wasn't going to come clean. She wasn't going to admit anything. She was going to burn the whole house down and make me the arsonist. That night I left. I packed a bag, drove to a cheap Holiday Inn off I-95, and sat in the parking lot for hours staring at the dashboard lights. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I just sat there hollowed out, wondering how the hell my life had come to this. That was the breaking point. The moment I realized the truth wasn't just about an affair. It was about a woman I had loved more than myself, choosing to destroy me rather than admit what she had done. And in the days that followed, the fallout began. When I walked out of our house that night in November 2019, I thought I was just giving myself space to breathe. A temporary break. A night or two at the Holiday Inn to collect my thoughts. Maybe talk to a lawyer. Maybe figure out how to confront Sarah without the world spinning out of control. But life doesn't wait for you to catch your breath. Once a story like abuse is out there, once it spreads through whispers and social media and family group chats, it grows legs of its own. By the end of that week, I wasn't just a husband who'd been cheated on. I was a man with a reputation I didn't recognize. The first gut punch came from my own family. My younger sister, Amanda, called me on November 13th. I remember staring at her name lighting up my phone, grateful for the lifeline, thinking she'd be the one person who could ground me in all of this. But when I answered, her voice was sharp, full of something I'd never heard directed at me before, suspicion. She asked me straight out if it was true, if I'd hurt Sarah. She said Sarah had called her crying, saying she was afraid to go home. I can't explain how much that hurt. Amanda and I grew up together in a house where our dad slammed his fists on the table when dinner wasn't hot enough, where our mom spent more time hiding in the bathroom than smiling. Amanda had clung to me when we were kids because I was her safe place. I was the one who took her for ice cream when Dad lost his temper, the one who patched up her knee when she fell off her bike. And now she was looking at me like I was him. I tried to explain. I told her about the affair, about the emails, about Mark. But Amanda's silence on the other end told me she wasn't convinced. She muttered something about needing space and hung up. That silence between us would stretch for months. Work was no better. My boss called me into his office on November 18th. He closed the blinds before he even started talking, which was never a good sign. He said there had been concerns raised about my behavior at home, that HR had been notified anonymously. He stressed they weren't accusing me of anything, but the tone said otherwise. He told me to take some time off while things got sorted out. That phrase, take some time off, felt like code for we don't trust you, and we don't want you here until the smoke clears. I walked out of that office carrying a cardboard box with my stapler, a photo of Sarah and me from our honeymoon in Maui, and the sickening realization that she had reached into my career too. That the woman who once cheered me on as I studied late nights for certifications was now casually dismantling everything I'd built. Friends. Forget it. Half of them drifted to her side without even asking me for my version of the story. Mutual friends especially. It was easier, I guess, to believe her narrative. It was cleaner, charming, social Sarah, the victim of her angry husband, and me, the quiet IT guy who kept to himself, suddenly cast as the monster in the shadows. The loneliness of those weeks was suffocating. I remember nights at the Holiday Inn, when the silence was so heavy it felt like a weight pressing on my chest. I'd sit on the edge of the bed, staring at the patterned carpet, wondering how my life had collapsed so quickly. There was a moment, God, I hate admitting this, when I sat in the bathroom of that hotel staring at a bottle of pills, thinking maybe it would be easier to just not wake up. That thought scared me more than anything Sarah had done. It was the moment I realized how deep I'd sunk, how much power her lies had over me, but at the same time something inside me refused to give in. Maybe it was stubbornness, maybe survival instinct, but I decided that if Sarah wanted to bury me, she'd have to dig the grave herself. I wasn't going to lie down and make it easy for her. I moved out of the house officially in December, found a small apartment in Somerville, the kind of place that smelled faintly of curry from the restaurant downstairs. It was nothing like the home we'd built together, but it was mine. 4 walls where her lies couldn't touch me. Still, every night I lay awake, I thought about the empty rooms back in our house, about the Christmas tree we'd bought together the year before, about the stockings with our names on them that would never hang side by side again. The holidays were brutal. My mom invited me to Christmas dinner, but the way she looked at me across the table, hesitant, uncertain, like she didn't know if I was safe to be around, cut deeper than I can describe. My dad didn't say much, just grunted and poured himself another whiskey, but the smirk on his face told me he thought I'd finally turned out just like him. That thought haunted me, because what if Sarah had been right? What if I had inherited more of him than I wanted to admit? I replayed every moment of our marriage in my head, looking for cracks I might have caused. The fights about money, the times I stayed late at work and she ate dinner alone, the moments I withdrew into myself instead of opening up. Were those the seeds of what she called abuse? Did she twist neglect into violence, indifference into cruelty? Or was it all just a convenient smokescreen for her affair with Mark? January 2020 was when the fallout went public. Social media, the great amplifier of rumors, lit up. A mutual friend tagged Sarah in a photo at a New Year's Eve party. Someone commented something vague about her being so strong. I didn't think much of it until another person replied, "She's amazing for getting out when she did." Not many women could be that brave. There it was in black and white for the world to see. My wife had made me into a cautionary tale, a hashtag waiting to happen. And the worst part? People believed it. No one asked for proof. No one questioned her story. They just applauded her, sent her heart emojis, called her resilient. Meanwhile, I was the ghost in the background, erased, rewritten, condemned without trial. The mental toll was crushing. I stopped answering my phone, stopped going out. The grocery store became a minefield, every glance from a stranger a potential accusation. I remember standing in line at Trader Joe's, holding a carton of almond milk, when a woman I vaguely knew from Sarah's yoga group walked in. She saw me, froze, then turned on her heel and left without buying anything. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just losing my marriage. I was losing my community, my place in the world. Therapy saved me, if I'm being honest. I started seeing a counselor in February 2020. At first, I just sat there in silence, arms crossed, waiting for her to tell me what to do. But slowly, session by session, I started to untangle the mess in my head. She reminded me that abuse is about patterns of control and violence, and that nothing I described fit that. She reminded me that Sarah's lies said more about her than about me. And she reminded me that grief doesn't just come from death. It comes from betrayal, from the loss of the life you thought you had. Still, the emotional fallout lingered. Nights were the hardest. That was when memories crept in uninvited. Sarah's laugh echoing in the kitchen, her hand brushing mine on long drives. The plans we'd made for kids that would never exist. I'd lie awake staring at the ceiling, wondering if she thought about me at all, or if she was too busy building her new life with Mark to care about the ruins she left behind. The final blow of that winter came in March 2020, right before the world shut down for COVID. I got an email from a college friend I hadn't spoken to in years. He said he'd heard the stories, that he was sorry, but he couldn't stay in touch anymore. That was when it hit me. Sarah's narrative wasn't just confined to our circle. It had spread outward, rippling through old friendships, professional connections, even people I barely knew. She had painted me into a monster, and the world believed her. By the time lockdown hit, I was already living in isolation. In a twisted way, the pandemic was almost a relief. Everyone was locked away. Everyone was isolated. So my loneliness blended into the background. No one expected me to show up at parties or family gatherings. No one asked questions. The silence that had once suffocated me became a shield. But even in that silence, the fallout echoed. Every time I opened social media, every time I saw her face smiling in some filtered selfie with Mark lurking in the comments, I felt that old wound rip open again. And every time I thought about speaking out, about telling my side, I froze. Because who would believe me over her? Who would take the word of the abuser against the survivor? It was a dark season of my life, one where I nearly lost myself completely. But even in that darkness, a small ember of anger burned. Not the kind of anger that lashes out, but the kind that smolders, waiting. The kind that whispers, one day the truth will come out, and when it did, it changed everything. When the door slammed shut that night, it wasn't just the sound of wood meeting metal. It was the sound of everything I had trusted collapsing in one single heartbeat. I stood in the empty living room, the silence pressing against my chest like a weight I couldn't push off. My wife's suitcase was gone, her shoes missing from the rack, and her perfume, the one that used to linger softly in the air after she passed by, was nowhere to be found. All that was left behind was the suffocating emptiness of betrayal. I barely remember how long I stood there, staring at the space she once occupied. Minutes, hours? My body felt numb, but my mind raced like a wildfire out of control. Questions kept circling back to one truth I didn't want to accept. She had left me, and she had chosen someone else. The same woman who once promised me forever had walked away without hesitation. Sleep became impossible. Every time I closed my eyes, I pictured her laughing with him, holding him the way she used to hold me, whispering words she once reserved for my ears alone. The more I thought about it, the more it ate me alive from the inside. My appetite disappeared. I lived off coffee and bitterness. Friends called. My brother tried checking in, but I ignored everyone. How could I explain what had happened when I didn't even understand it myself? Days blurred together, each one emptier than the last. I found myself replaying our relationship like a broken film reel. The vacations, the late-night drives, the stupid arguments over what to order for dinner, all those moments seemed like lies now. Were they real? Or had she been pretending all along? My chest tightened at the thought that maybe, just maybe, I had never really known the woman I built my world around. But in the midst of the chaos, something unexpected began to take root. At first it was small, almost invisible, a flicker of anger, not just at her but at myself. Anger that I had given so much without guarding any piece of me. Anger that I had ignored the signs, brushed off the excuses and swallowed the lies because I was too afraid of what they might mean. That anger, raw and bitter, slowly started fueling something else. Resolve. I couldn't keep living like a ghost in my own life. I couldn't keep giving her the power to ruin me. Not when she was out there moving on. So I decided I would fight. Not for her, but for myself. If she had chosen another life, then fine. But I would build mine back from the ashes she left behind. The first step was small. I cleaned the apartment, not just because it needed it, but because I needed to reclaim my space. Every shirt of hers I found shoved in a drawer, every photo frame gathering dust on the shelves, I packed them up. At first it broke me all over again, but as the boxes filled, so did a strange sense of strength. This was no longer her home. This was mine. Yet despite these tiny victories, nights remained brutal. That's when the loneliness crept in, whispering doubts into the dark corners of my mind. What if I was the problem? What if I wasn't enough? What if she never loved me at all? And though I hated admitting it, I still longed for her sometimes. Longed for the comfort of her voice, the familiarity of her presence, even if those things had been poisoned. But here's the thing about pain. It can either destroy you or reshape you. And I knew deep down, this was only the beginning of the journey I never asked for, but one I had no choice but to walk, because as much as I thought I had lost everything, I was starting to realize I hadn't lost the one thing that mattered most, myself. The weeks stretched into months, and in that time, I changed in ways I never thought possible. At first it was just survival, waking up, forcing myself out of bed, making it through the day without collapsing under the weight of the memories. But slowly, survival turned into something else, growth. I started running again, something I hadn't done in years. At first I could barely manage a few blocks before gasping for air, but I pushed through. Each step on the pavement felt like I was leaving a piece of pain behind. My body grew stronger, and so did my mind. With every mile I reminded myself that I was still here, still alive, still capable of moving forward. Therapy came next. I had resisted it for so long, convincing myself I could handle it alone. But walking into that room, sitting down with someone who didn't judge me, who listened and helped me untangle the knots inside my head, it was like opening a window in a suffocating house. I spoke about everything, the betrayal, the anger, the fear that I wasn't enough. And for the first time, I heard myself clearly. I realized her choices had nothing to do with my worth. They were hers. Her failures, her selfishness, her inability to be honest. Not mine. One afternoon, months later, I ran into her. It wasn't planned, just a cruel twist of fate. She looked different, hollow almost. Her smile didn't reach her eyes, and there was a weight about her that hadn't been there before. For a second, my chest tightened with old emotions. But then something remarkable happened. I felt nothing. No anger, no longing, no pain, just indifference. She was no longer the center of my story. We exchanged small talk, shallow and meaningless. She asked if I was okay, and I smiled, a real honest smile, and said, "Better than ever." And in that moment I meant it. When I walked away, it felt like closing a chapter for good. She was my past, and I no longer needed her shadow in my present. Life didn't magically become perfect after that. Healing isn't a straight line, it's messy, full of setbacks and unexpected waves of grief. But I had learned something priceless. I was stronger than I ever gave myself credit for. The betrayal that once threatened to destroy me had instead rebuilt me. Not into the same person I was before, but into someone wiser, tougher, and more in tune with myself. And maybe, just maybe, that was the gift hidden in the pain. Because in the end, her leaving wasn't the end of my story. It was the beginning of mine.